All right, let's go. All right. Canada won the gold the way it should be. And what did you think of the game?
Well, there's pretty exciting, heart-stopping games with the U.S. and with the Czechs.
I enjoy 3-on-3.
Yeah, I do too, to tell you the truth, 3-on-3. But you can't play the whole game 3-on-3.
No, but it's better than a shootout.
Actually, you don't need the fourth line.
Lots of upsets too, eh? Like you're watching when the Czechs were playing the Swedes. The Swedes were up 2-0. And the Czechs scored, and then there was 30 seconds left, and the poor defenseman iced the puck. The Czechs tied it up.
Why did he ice the puck? He was right.
He had a clear line going up there. But that's what you and I have always talked about, Dad. In hockey, all over the thing, it's no sin to ice the puck now.
They'll clean that up. They have to clean it up because I counted 21 icings one time.
Czechs tied it up and then won in overtime, and then the U.S. and Sweden was 8-7 was the finals, and so they were pretty exciting games. You know,
it was funny. Like I knew what the Czech coach was doing. I knew what he was doing. Don't upset the Canadians. Just let them go along.
Yeah, you called that. You said, they're just lull them to sleep, and then they're going to come on the last half of the third period. You said that in the first period.
Yeah, I didn't think it'd be so obvious, but unbelievable. 2-0, and there's that score again. 2-0, up by 2 goals.
Well, the one thing though that you do have to admit, I think the Czechs and the Slovaks, they were pretty well coached.
They're pretty good coach. They're pretty good coaches. They were in the game. They knew what was happening.
Like when you looked at it, if they had a chance to get it out, they got it out. And I think that the Czechs especially were really covering the points, so the Canadian defense couldn't pinch in too much. But
well, I'll tell you one thing: that Bedard, he is something, boy.
Well, listen,
it was like that when he scored that winning goal in overtime. It was like a movie.
Yeah, left. Right, left. Yeah.
One thing, Dad, I really enjoyed watching the games with you. The things that you point out during the games is really interesting. The one thing I learned is, where is no man's land on the ice? I remember, there they are, no man's land. And I'm going, well, where? Describe no man's land, the way they play now.
Well,
like it's the wingers, and the Canadians were doing this, I hate to say.
Oh, my goodness.
They're not far enough out at the points to cover the point, right?
No, they're not.
And then they're not far enough in to help the defense.
Well, they run in to help the defense.
They run in and they run out. They run in, they run out.
Believe me.
And then once you mentioned it, I really noticed it a lot, that they were in no man's land.
Well, anyhow, getting back to Bedard, he had 9 goals, 14 assists, and he was plus 15. That's pretty good in a series like that. So he's a pretty good hockey player. Now, how do you think he's going to do in the National Hockey League, Tim?
I think I think he'll do well the first year, but I think it's going to take him a year to adjust to the size. Yeah. Because he's not McDavid, whereas he's not as fast as McDavid or McKinnon. No, and he's not as big as those guys. Nobody's as fast as those guys. How about that goal McKinnon got last night? This is Sunday morning. Jeez, he walked around.
He looks like he gets mad.
I know.
And he looks like he gets mad. Every time he scores a goal,
it looked like beer league with him walking around those 2 defensemen, put it top corner. Right. But I think he's going to be a little bit, he'll be better than Jack Hughes, but it took Jack Hughes, who was a first-round pick, it took him a year to get adjusted to the size and the speed.
Tim, you told me, and I didn't believe it. 13 of these guys that played for the Czech team will go back to CHL.
Yeah, 13.
Suicide.
Our CHL players are better than their CHL players.
Suicide. We're committing suicide, and we don't even know it. We don't know anything about it.
Just think about that, though. You had the best kids of that age in the world, except for the Russians weren't in. And at the finals, 32 of them play in the CHL.
Amazing. It says something.
Well, You'd think, well, I'm not getting into that again.
Well, Tim, you always say the CHL doesn't promote themselves. I mean, they had commercials during the tournament, but they really don't promote themselves for the development of world-class players.
Well, let's get into the
Yeah,
goal.
they don't. And, you don't see anything about the CHL players. Like we were just talking this morning. We
Yeah.
were watching Sportsnet, and between Sportsnet and the other one on TSM, they don't even mention during their sports newscast, like their thing, the scores of the CHL games. But yet they'll show NCAA basketball and football. It's because, A, they're too lazy to find out the scores because Canadian television sports are very, very lazy. And 2, it's just easier for them to take highlights from like the feeds from the NCAA. Now, the CHL doesn't help themselves. I've said that many times.
Yeah, you said, why don't they send a highlight reel to the broadcasters?
But they don't even, and like, I know we're getting off topic here. Yesterday, this is Sunday morning, yesterday from 1 o'clock till 4 o'clock, NBC televised the whole football game on just the top high school kids in the U.S.
Really?
Yeah. And we don't even get prospect games now, or things, so... But yeah, it's hard to believe that almost all the players were from the CHL, especially.
That's the way it should be.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting point, Tim, where you said about, think about those parents, that'll be the end of their era. Like a lot of those parents have been together since their kids were, Bantam or Pee Wee, because they went up through the ranks, right?
Yeah.
And this is the end. They've gone through under 17, they've gone to, and then this is it for them. They'll part ways.
Yeah, good way to go out.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Well, let's get on another subject here. I hate to use that word tank because that goes way back to Lemieux. But anyhow, tank job, Chicago. Let's say it appears they didn't try to improve themselves.
They say they're in a rebuilding phase.
Yes, that's it. Chicago, Montreal, Vancouver, Arizona, and Columbus. I don't know about Vancouver.
Well, Vancouver, I don't think they'll tank.
No, but they're in there.
Again, they're in no man's land. They're not doing bad enough to get a good pick, and they're not doing well enough to make the playoffs. So they're in no man's land.
Yeah, but this all stems from Eddie Johnson. But when they wanted Lemieux so bad that
Pittsburgh, right?
Yeah, Pittsburgh. When he was the GM of the Pittsburgh, it was so obvious that he. What would you say, Tim?
I was reading some goalie for Pittsburgh had a 3 or 4 game winning streak, and they sent him down to the American Hockey League.
They don't. There's no way they wanted to lose Lemieux, and it worked out.
And that's why they have a draft system now. They have a lottery because of that. So if you were Bedard's parents, Dad, where would you want him to go? So let's say the top 3. You got Arizona, Chicago. I don't know who.
Well, Chicago. They have to start over again, and I guess they're going to start over again. I would want them to go to Chicago. If you go to Chicago right now, nobody even knows you.
No. Well, the rumor going around, I know we don't like talking about rumors, but the conspiracy theory is on the internet is that Arizona is going to trade Chikrin to Seattle and get Wright in a couple of picks, Shane Wright. Then they could very well possibly get Bedard. And then you figure Matthew might be going there in another year. Yeah, they'd be looking pretty good, just in time for their new rink.
Yeah, you have to do something for that new rink. They have to do something for the new rink, the players coming in.
Yeah.
It'll be a beautiful rink, and they'll need something.
Well, I could see Matthews going there, hometown. They said he wants $15 million a year.
How much?
$15 million, they said the rumor. Again, the rumor going around, that's what he'll be asking for.
Well, I don't know. The $15 million a year, that's enough, even for the Leafs. And they pay the most of anybody. Boy, they put on that power play. That's a pretty good power play.
Dad, we were watching a game last night, and we just watched the World Juniors. And it was exciting hockey. And then you get it that it's dog days of hockey versus the championship. But I'm watching the Leafs, and they were playing Detroit. Less than a minute in, a chintzy penalty. And you know what? I just flicked it off. And the crazy upside down world it is, the refs in the World Juniors were pretty good about calling.
And one time we used to say, it's too bad that they don't have the NHL referees down there. And now we're saying, I mean, it's ridiculous. I know. And they were pretty good. They let
The only kind of thing that was weird was the amount of majors that they called.
Well, that's in the rule book, that, and the guys were cut.
So, okay, Dad, I got to ask you, because we have a lot of Americans listening who are very disappointed. The 2 goals called back on the Americans in Canada.
No, they were that was the rules. That was the rules. If it had been Canadians, I would have been ticked off like everybody else. The funny thing is, the only people that care are the Canadians, the juniors, and if they have it in any other country, they don't draw. But
well, they even for Sweden and Austria, they almost had sellouts at the games.
Yeah. The main when Sweden would play.
Well, no, I'm just saying in Canada, even when Canada didn't play, they had big. They
had good crowd. Well, they had they'd already bought their ticket.
Yeah, probably had to buy package, right?
Packages, yeah.
Well, Jake DeBrusk, get back to the National Hockey League. Jake DeBrusk is out for about a month, and again with his gloves, he took a shot with the glove. The first thing I would do if I ran the league, the first thing I'd do is ban those gloves that they have. They are the smallest gloves, and that's why they get hurt.
But can the individual hockey player change his gloves, or are they mandatory?
Oh no, nobody's going to change the gloves.
No, they want to.
You're
follow
better off taking an injury than
set the precedent.
Well, yeah,
unless
if you don't score goals.
How about the Bruins, though? I mean, I know we talk about them. We get a lot of people in Boston listening, but I got to tell you, if I like the Bruins, and you like to see them do well. I'm nervous for the Bruins that they haven't gone into a slump.
Yeah,
I
don't know.
And that Omen, he's only lost 1 game this year.
I know it's done. I mean, you see them play. They're big. First of all, they're big, but it's a good job they have that line of Marchand, Pastore, whatever his name is,
and Bergeron.
and Bergeron in the front. That's a pretty good line. Boy, you throw that line out there. DeBrusk got hurt, and he put Pasternak up there, and he should be there all the time.
If you're coaching though, and you see everything going along kickety poo for a long time, do you get nervous as a coach?
Well, you should have seen it when we won. We never lost in 18. I was nervous. I knew it was coming, but I never thought it would be as bad as it. Could not get out of that slump we were in. We were so far in first spot. We went in a slump and for a month, and we come out.
It was right around this time. It was the end of January, the beginning of February.
But I'll tell you one thing: that they're going to miss that DeBrusk. He was second leading scorer, I think it was, and he's a pretty good hockey player.
Talk about the Boston Gardens. I remember when you guys were down, you as the kids were down there, and Led Zeppelin was coming to town. I was trying to get tickets, but I don't know, Daddy didn't have enough pull to get me tickets. But anyway, tell us the story about you and Led Zeppelin with the Gardens.
Yeah, so they were selling tickets and this back then, you had to line up for stay overnight to get the tickets, right? It wasn't online.
And it was cold.
And it was really cold that night. It was really, really cold in Boston. I think there was a bit of a snowstorm. So somebody had the idea of let the kids who were waiting for the Led Zeppelin tickets inside the Gardens. And they would give a number where you were in line. And then at 8 o'clock, they were going to say, numbers 1 through 20, and then you would go into the box office and buy the tickets. Well, they ended up having around close to a sellout. They close to 12,000.
Led Zeppelin always told it.
12,000 people waiting to get tickets. So, but you and I, we went to practice in the morning, and we didn't realize what was going on, right? And so in the old day, at the old Gardens, we would go up through the back ramp, and then we would walk into the dressing room, and you wouldn't see the rink. And there was kind of like a hallway, the dressing room, and then there was a big drapes, and you couldn't see the rink. So we got there early, and so, I would have been maybe 11 or 12. And Scott Cashman, Wayne Cashman's son, was there. Craig and Robbie Cheever's, Jerry Cheever's sons were there. So we usually went out for a skate before. So we were getting our skates on, and we got we were walking out. And for some reason, Terry O'Reilly and Peter McNabb were kind of hanging around, and which was kind of weird. They were making small talk with us. And we opened up the curtain to walk out, and there's 14,000, 12,000, 14,000 people. and they're screaming and yelling, and like we're like, oh my goodness. So we turn around like we're not walking, and Peter and Terry stood there and said, nope. If you want to play in the National Hockey League, you got to learn how to play in front of people. And they opened the door and made us go on the ice, and then locked the door. So we're skating around, and people were throwing stuff at us. They were throwing cookies at us.
Yeah, but tell us why they were throwing stuff at you.
Well, this was like early on, right? So they were throwing stuff, and like if we shot and missed the net, they would boo and stuff like that. So we wanted to get off, but we couldn't because they locked the door, right? we couldn't get off. So finally, they opened the door and got off. And I don't even think you guys got on the ice, did they?
No, and I remember a big guy with the bull gang. They call him bull. And he you better get those kids off the ice. There's going to be trouble. I didn't even know what was going on.
Yeah.
And he says, well, they're fooling around with the tickets with Led Zeppelin, so you better get those kids off the ice. So I sent the trainer out to get them off the ice. I didn't understand what was going on.
So what happened was that I guess after maybe less than 100 people were called up to get tickets, they had to announce that the show was sold out. So can you imagine those kids? They were probably drinking and smoking and the whole deal, and tired, and they just started wrecking the place.
Yeah, they did. They did a pretty good job. And what did they do, Cindy? You remember?
Well, all I remember is that they yanked the toilets off and flooded the place. The plumbing, and it was really big news in Boston, boy, when they wrecked the gardens.
Back then, there were no cell phones and there was no videos, and the Boston police cleaned it out pretty quick.
Oh, those Irish cops.
With their big
German you better move.
With their big German shepherds coming in.
Oh, I remember.
Do you remember? You know, the thing I remember the most with the policemen with their German shepherds is on Saturdays when the Bruins used to play on Saturday afternoon and the Celtics would play that night, and we'd be waiting for you by the wives' room where you come out, and the policemen would come in with their monster German shepherds because they wanted people to get out. You know what I mean? I could see some kids trying to hide because they were at the Bruins game, and now they get to see a Celtics game if they hide really well, and that's how they went through the gardens with these big monster shepherds going through and looking for kids that were trying to hide out. Like, holy smokes, watch them go by.
They looked like they were bears almost.
Yeah, they were. They were huge.
It's a funny thing. I know I told this story a long time ago, but I'm going to tell it again. The guy, a kid, 16 years old, stole one of the sticks, and they were carrying him out, and the kid went to kick one of the cops. Oh boy, you just did not do that.
No,
you did not do that down in Boston. And I saw the guy take the billy out of the back of his pocket and cork the guy right over the head. The guy, he went and.
Well, I think he said he broke his nose. And
blood
all
they did
over
a number,
the place.
and so I went up, and as I was walking by, I said, "Geez, you have to do that to the kid." And he said, "You want your stick stolen?" And yes, sir. And I kept right on walking. Boy, those Irish cops, you never fool with them.
Dad and Cindy, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Spreads.ca. They're a Canadian-owned online and sportsbook. And if you sign up now and use the promo GRAPES, they'll match your deposit up to $500. You get 10 spins on the big wheel for some big money. And then your first sports bet, they'll spot you $25. So back then you could...
And Canadian money and Canadian...
Yeah, it's Canadian funds, which is good, and Canadian money. And as I said, they've been a very good sponsor for us and helped Don Cherry's Pet Rescue Foundation.
Yes, they have.
And,
I just don't understand other people going out to all the other ones when they got a great one here in Canada. And as you say, Canadian money supports charities. I don't...
Anyhow, we should talk about those two goalies that played in against Czech and that in the last game were 6 foot. If they say they're 6'1", they're 6 foot. That's what usually we use. But all the goaltenders in the National Hockey League, all they do is draft big guys.
Right. Well, because the Thomas Milic for Canada, and then the other one was Thomas. I think it's Sukanek. They're 6'1", and they'd been passed over to the NHL. And these kids have gone really and have played well in the CHL, like have gone far into the playoffs. And the reason being is that general managers think a 6'1" goalie is too small.
I remember Darren Pang. Remember Darren Pang?
Yeah.
He was the smallest of them all. But the goalies now, Linus Ulmuck is 6'5". Hollebuck is 6'4".
Shazerkson's the only one that's 6'1". These are the
6'1".
top goalies with their save percentage.
Logan Thompson is 6'4". Jake, I'm reading this.
Ottinger
is 6'5". Martin Jones 6'4". Bileski is 6'4". And Tristan Jerry is 6'2". And here's the two guys that in the best in the world. Well, I guess you call them the best in the world. They're 6 foot. So
Yeah,
I don't know. It seems as if they just do not want to get a small goalie.
Right. And I mean,
Anyway,
but
they're
that,
not really small.
No. But I mean, you and I've seen that. Like it's if you're not 6'2" or 6'3", the NHL GMs don't want you. And we saw that in the CHL.
Yeah.
Like we went out and watched a lot of really good smaller goalies.
Yeah.
Not get drafted. And it was weird. I remember you were talking. We saw some goalies, Cindy, who at age 15 were like 6'3" or 6'4", and they were the first goalies to go.
Yeah.
And didn't, a lot of them didn't pan out. And you saw these smaller goalies who were like maybe 5'9", 5'10", at 15, 16, which is,
Which
they're
is
still
pretty good size.
and would win the league championship or would do that. And,
They'd never even think of drafting.
never even think of them. They're too
So
small.
what's your theory? Well, I know the theory.
I don't
Would
know.
you be prejudiced? Is that the word? Against a
What
shorter
was
goalie?
Cheevers? What was Cheevers? He's about
He
6
wasn't
foot.
that big.
He was 6 foot.
At most.
Do they just figure because they're big and they're monster equipment that there's just less net to?
Well, I guess remember who was the guy who had the 2x4 in the back?
Garth Snow.
Yeah, they've gone back then, and they have the equipment down pretty good now. It's not that big.
Right. But what the CHL GMs would say is that these smaller goalies, when they're playing against a higher competition, they would get picked apart. And then the NHL GM said these 6'1" goalies, which is, which means they're 6'3" on the ice, would get picked apart. I remember there was a small goalie for Mississauga Rebels about 6 or 7 years ago. And he was fantastic.
Yeah, and not drafted.
Not drafted. Never even got a sniff. Before we wrap up, Dad, we're going to do one more question. Cindy?
Okay, this is from David99. If you could take one player, but not McDavid, to start a team, who would it be?
McDavid, he's another world.
This guy's smart. He says, but not McDavid, because he knows you'd go there. Who would it be?
I knew you were going to ask me that question. I had to think it over. And I could have said, second league scorer and third league scorer, and Matthews and the whole deal. But you know who I'd take? I'd take Bergeron of the Boston Bruins. And I know, you're winners of the Boston Bruins, and you always stick with the Boston Bruins. He scores, he gets 30 goals a year when he's more important. He's definitely on the draws.
But because we were watching the World Juniors, and Canada was just getting murdered on the draws, like murdered. And they'd have a power play, you're right. The Czechs or the Americans, they'd win, especially the Americans, just killed them on the draws. They'd down the ice. It's 30 seconds.
Yeah, well, I would definitely have a guy on the team that can take a draw, even if he goes out there takes the draw and then gets right up. Anyhow, Bergeron kills the penalty. He plays the power play. He's a leader and he's a team player, and that's the guy I picked. If I couldn't have McDavid, I'd have Bergeron.